Let's travel back in time, deep into the 7th century Arabian desert. A document is being drafted, one that's going to change the course of history. Now, this wasn't just another treaty, it was a blueprint for a whole new way of living together. Today, we're diving into the Constitution of Medina, one of the world's very first written constitutions, and a truly radical vision for a society where different people could coexist.
So picture this. The year is 622. We're in the city of Medina, and this place is anything but quiet. It's a real powder keg of competing interests. You've got the locals, the Ansar, who are themselves split between two tribes, the Aus and Khazraj, that have been feuding forever. Then you have the Muhajirun, refugees from Makkah who fled persecution. And you've got long-established Jewish communities, each with its own laws and its own history. The tension, you could cut it with a knife.
So that's the million-dollar question, right? In a world that runs on blood feuds and tribal loyalty, how in the world do you get all these different, often hostile groups to become a single, unified society? How do you make one nation out of so many parts? Well, the answer wasn't going to be the sword. It was something way more revolutionary. A written contract. All right, so let's take a closer look at this document itself. Back then, it was known simply as the scroll. You know, one of the very first things the prophet did when he arrived was draft this formal agreement. And this wasn't some vague mission statement. It was a constitution that laid out in detail the rights and the responsibilities of every single group in the city. The goal was simple but absolutely massive. Create a real framework for people to live together in peace. And get this. This charter was for everyone. It clearly defined the roles of the Ansar, the Muhajirun, and, this is so important, the established Jewish tribes of Medina. This wasn't a document for just one faith. It was the founding charter for a city-state where multiple faiths had to coexist. And right at the heart of this constitution was an idea that was, well, it was completely game-changing. It basically redefined what it even meant to be a nation. You have to understand, before this moment, your identity in Arabia was pretty simple. It was your family, your bloodline. Your tribe was everything. This constitution just shattered that old way of thinking by introducing a new concept, the Ummah, a nation that wasn't defined by who your ancestors were, but by what you believed in and the citizenship you shared. Now, this idea was anchored in something deeper than politics. It was rooted in divine revelation. Verses like this one taught people that their main identity wasn't the tribe anymore. It was this new community, one nation united under God. I mean, can you imagine the psychological shift that must have created? The message was unmistakable. All those old tribal loyalties that had caused so much conflict for generations, they were now secondary. Your primary loyalty was to this new, inclusive ummah, where every single citizen was bound together by a sacred agreement. Okay, but this new nation wasn't just created to exist. It was given a mission, a real purpose. And that purpose was to actively go out and pursue justice. The Quran itself lays out this mission. This wasn't supposed to be just another nation. It was meant to be a just nation. Its whole reason for being was to be a living example of fairness for all of humanity. And here's the catch. This best nation status, it wasn't a given. It wasn't a birthright. It was something you had to earn through action. You had to actively promote what's right and just, al-ma'ruf, and forbid what's wrong and unjust, al-munkar. This basically created a kind of moral meritocracy. A nation's greatness wasn't about its money, its power, or its family tree. It was measured by how committed it was to actually upholding justice. For that time and place, that was a truly radical idea. Now, a mission for justice is great, but how do you actually make it happen? Well, it was all built on one critical pillar: absolute equality for everyone under the law. To make sure that happened, the Constitution laid down a really clear rule. When there was a dispute, the final say didn't belong to a tribal chief. It belonged to a single, consistent source, divine law, as given by the messenger. This completely leveled the playing field, so the weak could finally stand up to the powerful. And believe me, this new system got put to the test almost immediately. See, under the old tribal rules, if a member of the powerful Banu an-Nadir tribe was killed, they demanded double the blood money that they themselves would pay for killing someone from the weaker Banu Qurayza tribe. Justice was all about who had more power, not about what was right. But after the Constitution was signed, that injustice was challenged. The Banu Qurayza, feeling empowered by this new promise of equality, refused to accept the old unfair system. They took their case directly to the Prophet. It was a huge test. Was this new law for real? Was it going to be equal for everybody?
The answer that came back was through revelation, and it was crystal clear. This verse laid down one single standard of justice for all. A life is a life, an eye is an eye, period.
The impact of this was just immediate and profound. With that single ruling, a system of tribal privilege that had existed for centuries was just gone. It was a powerful demonstration that, under this new constitution, the law was king, and it applied to everyone, powerful and weak alike.
And finally, there is one more piece to this amazing document, a principle that is so relevant today: the guaranteed freedom of faith.
Let's be really clear about this. This was not a document of forced conversion. It was a social contract. The Constitution went out of its way to guarantee freedom of religion for all citizens, and it specifically named the Jewish community as protected members of this new Ummah. This idea was woven right into the fabric of the new city. It made religious autonomy a cornerstone of the whole society. The message couldn't be clearer. Your faith is your own business. And this constitutional principle is backed up by one of the most famous verses in the entire Quran. It states that true faith can never, ever be forced on someone. So this wasn't just a smart political move, it was a core religious belief. So when we step back and really look at the Constitution of Medina, we're not just looking at a dusty old artifact. We're looking at a revolutionary blueprint, a society based on unity beyond tribe, a mission for justice, total equality before the law, and freedom of conscience. And it leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What can this 1,400-year-old document teach us about building a more just and inclusive world today?